Nebraska Preps Postgame with Damon Benning and Jacob Padilla.
You heard the big voice guy. We welcome you in. I'm not even sure what week this is. It's halfway through the season, roughly. A little over the halfway point.
Yeah, 6, 7, somewhere in that range.
As district games and wins and losses become very, very important here down the stretch. I welcome in Jacob Padilla. I'm ODB. They call me Damon. This is Nebraska Preps Post Game, and we are here for you. I was kind of hoping that we wouldn't drop the pod until after the rescheduled Tuesday games, but considering my name is just on the show, I don't control anything that happens.
Yeah. Well, with the studio's pretty popular. It's hard to get in here.
Yeah. Stop being good at what you do out there. These people are utilizing studio time as we kid because we care, man. How are things? Good week, good weekend, relatively quiet? Not really.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot going on in a lot of
Nebraska basketball isn't one of them. Holy smokes.
Yeah, that's bad.
Cause for concern?
Oh, definitely. The news, at least 7 players tested positive, so those guys are going to be out for a while. So when you do get cleared to return, how soon will you actually have a full enough team to play?
Yeah,
so,
you're looking at least probably a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that means I have more time to dive into the high school basketball. I don't have to worry about watching the Huskers.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hey, listen, that's going to be somebody's gain. I mean, we'll get to Mitchell and his 40-point output. Again, there aren't a lot of people around the state of Nebraska covering all gamuts of high school basketball, which, well, in particular you, we do here at Nebraska Sports Prep, the post-game show. That's not even really post-game. It's pre and post. We'll work on that, right? Semantics.
Yeah, I mean, works a little bit better for football when everybody's playing on the same day for the most part, but we want to keep the brain going.
Thursday, Friday, It's easy, right? I mean, basketball, and it's one of the cool things about the Metro, and there are some tough ones, right? I mean, we'll take Papillion, for instance, who play tomorrow. They go Tuesday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
They got Westside tomorrow night on Tuesday. They've got their rival Papio South, and then you've got a weekend Tilden. It's like, I mean, the kids want to play, but the ups and downs and the emotions, the physical grind, there'll be a lot of teams playing 3 games in 1 week this week.
Yeah, and imagine just like the mental strain. Like all season you're worried about COVID shutting down your team, and then you get a snow day on top of that wipes out a big game for you and now compacts your schedule. Like you said, 3 tough games in 1 week, especially for a team that's not terribly deep. Kind of most of their production comes from their kind of starting 5 and 6-man. So it's going to be a tough week, but they've had a tough week every week of the season so far. So they'll get a chance to, again, show how much progress they've made from those tough games early on.
Before we get too deep into the weeds with individual games, let's talk generally speaking. In your opinion, who's most like their record says they are? Papillion La Vista South or the Papillion Monarchs? And they'll get a chance to figure it out on Friday when they see one another in that crosstown rivalry. But both teams have had a pretty grueling schedule, hovering around the 500 mark. Who's most like their record says they are?
Yeah, wish you would have saved this question for next week because then it'd be easy to answer. A little bit tougher now, but I'd probably side with Papillion La Vista just based on kind of the roster makeup and what we're seeing for Papio South is kind of the deficiencies that we knew coming in that were the big question marks with what they lost from last year. That's kind of hurting them right now. Like they've got kind of their main 3 guys that are producing most of their points. And I think I saw their last game. Brocale, Cassutt, and Dempsey were the only 3 that scored inside the arc. 3 guys, only guys that scored inside the arc and only guys that got to the free throw line. So that's going to be tough to live when you're 3, 4, 5 are your only guys that are creating most of your offense. So they got to get a little bit more out of that backcourt. So that's kind of, I think Papio, pretty solid, like 1 through 5, a little bit better balance there. They got a couple of different ways to skin a cat, right? Yeah. I mean,
Although you could make the case, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. You could make the case up to this point. Aidan Graham belongs somewhere in the discussion of the Metro's most improved.
Yeah, and Aidan's a guy that I coached against him back in middle school when I first started OSA. Seeing him kind of rise up through the ranks and get better and better and just shoot up the last year and a half or so height-wise. Used to be
6'2", maybe.
Yeah, and long, and so
extra wiry.
Yeah, so he's been a huge part of kind of what they've done last year. Obviously, they had big Preston Kellogg inside, and they're a little bit more kind of front court focused. The guards, you had Owen McLaughlin kind of as your typical point guard who not going to score a lot, but going to kind of run the show. Now you insert Graham there into that starting lineup, and he's one of your leading scorers, one of your better shooters, defensively making some plays as well. It kind of changes the dynamic of who they are as a team compared to where they were last year.
Yeah, heck of a story to tell, too. Not necessarily on the same level as turning into a five-star like Hunter Salas, but Aidan was a guy just a year ago at this time was double-dipping, playing JV. And you're kind of wondering, oh, my goodness, JV as a junior, it's like, oh, it's blasphemy. No, Aidan got his butt in the gym, stayed with it, gets an opportunity, and now we're having this conversation. I always tell kids, you never have your mind made up. Whether you're going to be a Hunter Salas and maybe not even start on your 8th grade or your 9th grade team for that matter. He played with a lot of good players, but or a guy like Aidan Graham where it's like your high school career is not over if your evolution isn't what you had always dreamt it out to be. It's really what you do with it when you're handling the moment, right? And he's really turned the corner. Now all of a sudden he's a focal point of the discussion and really integral to what the Monarchs do.
Yeah, and it's all about taking advantage of your opportunities as they're presented to you kind of throughout that whole process. And sometimes you'll get more opportunities depending on where you are. Sometimes you won't. I think a big part of that is heading in knowing, okay, here's what this situation looks like. There's some places you can go and you're going to play early because the school doesn't have other options. Yeah. Others, you're going to have to work your way up the ranks. And I think that's an important decision for if that's a big part of your school choice. You got to know that going in. So you can't get there. And that's kind of the thing where you come in expecting to play right away. Say like you go to prep expecting to play right away.
That's just not who they happen. Yeah, not who they have been, right? So history says, it's an older, mature bunch, and that's what they do. Now, having said that, so how important are they as we're trying to parse through? Basically we're talking about 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
10 seems to be a revolving door, right? Grand Island was in, now they're out. Millard West back in. We'll see what we think of Gretna. I'm going to get your thoughts on them before we're done here because they're kind of hovering, just hanging around. That 9-10 slot is Gretna. Again, tough schedule. And we'll get to that in a second. But how important are these next 6-7 days, in your opinion, between hashing out district seedings and what happens with, let's go all the way down to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the top 10 rankings?
Yeah, and so I think it's pretty clear what the top 5 is right now, I think, at this point. And then I think talent-wise, you're probably looking at Westside and the Papio schools as kind of that 6, 7, 8, kind of in that range. Then after that, it's
so 9-10 seems to be like what's happening.
Pick a team
this
out
week.
of a hat, because you've got so many teams with similar records at similar kind of talent levels where, you can see how they could be good, but then you could also see where they're going to struggle, and it ends up playing out that way. So they'll have a good week, and then they'll come kind of crashing back to earth the next week. So that's kind of what it is in that entire middle of Class A, I think, right now. We kind of have the tiers that have really established themselves at this point. And the West Side and the Papio schools, they've got a chance to kind of really establish themselves as that next tier because they got to start getting those wins now. Obviously, West Side's a little better off than those other two, but they haven't played quite the same schedule. So.
Right. We're still looking for I hear it on the streets, obviously, being emotionally invested in West Side, right? Like, who's your good win? Who's your good win? Well, they'll have a chance this week as they'll get Papillion and then Prep on Friday. Was game 1 a fluke at the Metro Holiday tournaments? Was that down to the wire kind of basketball game a fluke, or is that going to be who Westside is? How healthy is Tate Oddbody? For Papillion, you've got Westside Tuesday, and then Papillion La Vista South on Friday. where are you in terms of that 6-4 record? And there's Papillion South in that discussion as well, right? That kind of trying to slot and jostle for who's what. So is after this week, up to this point, and I'll let you get into Pius and Bellevue West because we were there together. It's funny, a guy that loves stats, I didn't even ask some other people in the building that do this for a job as well. I went right to the man because you're one of the few. I see this more in baseball because I love high school baseball. I obviously do College World Series. You keep a scorer's book. You flip like crazy. You don't get distracted texting. You're not. You'll use social media when you can during a game, but the stats and accuracy are important. Before I tweeted out what I thought I saw, I conferred with the expert. Wait a minute. Where do you have such and such, right? In this particular case, it was Chucky Hepburn. But that Bellevue West Pius game was something else.
Yeah. And so Pius, I think, in a lot of areas, they played well enough to be in that game.
Agreed.
They just won the turnovers in the third quarter when Bellevue West really kind of picked up the pressure. But even then, they kind of battled back, and it was only a 6-point game heading into the fourth. The problem was the three-point shooting. They played well enough. They didn't shoot well enough to win the game. And Pius was 4-21 from three. And your best three-point shooter, Charlie Hoiberg, 1 of 8.
Yeah, shot selection. I think you and I talked about this after the game. There was a stretch there. I don't know if it was panic or feeling like you had to match the hot shooting, right? Because obviously Chucky had his stretch in the second quarter where he was perfect from the field. And then Dotzler, Josiah, as that game wore on, really started to get comfortable playing off the ball.
Yeah.
Getting into the soft spots of that defense and being on the receiving end of Chucky's brilliance, putting that ball on a string. He goes perfect from behind the arc in the fourth quarter, and it's like
perfect from everywhere. Didn't miss a 2, a 3, or a free throw.
And you're like, what is going on here? You know what it was? It was good shooting from Bellevue West, and we agreed. If Bellevue West shoots the ball like that, it goes without saying they won't be beat. Most teams won't lose on nights like that, but when you're that good with getting into the teeth of the defense, and you're that dynamic with other guys like Fiddler and Dotzler, you shoot it like that, it may be all she wrote.
And especially when you're playing without 2 of your top 6 players. Greg Brown out, Evan Inselman, their 6th man, not able to play either. So you had guys like Preston Ames step up. You had Jackson Stuvey kind of get off the
schneid, right? Like
knock down a couple.
And listen, I'm a little biased when it comes to Jackson Stuvey just because I know the work he puts in, right? I see him work out. I see him train. I see him kind of stay with it. He's leaned out. I don't know if that team as a whole was on a diet, but their frames compared to Pius were vastly different. It stuck out like a sore thumb during that one. I actually thought, JP, it may come into play if Bellevue West got into foul trouble because of the physicality that Pius can exude on you. Especially
with their lack of depth, with not having many guys off the bench because of the guys that were missing. And yeah, you can definitely tell that Pius has been in the weight room, all those guys, especially the Hoiberg.
Do you believe the story that that's the first time they've lifted weights?
That was the story that our friend Jacob Bigelow was told, that they didn't lift before they got to Pius. But you look at them now, and
they looked amazing.
Yeah, and that's kind of how Sam, especially, that's how he had his success, putting his head down, going to the rim, kind of pushing guys out of the way to give himself angles to finish, and just using that strength. So he still put up some points, even though the three-point shot wasn't falling for him.
Let's stay with Pius just for a second, just because I think they proved that at more than a few occasions during that game, they proved that they belong, right? They weathered the second quarter onslaught, the individual. I think it was a 9-0 run that Chucky Hepburn himself went on as he went 6 of 6 from the field and his 13 points in the second quarter.
Finished with 24 points and 13 assists, just another masterful performance.
But they only go down at the half by 2. And I had the sense that they felt like they controlled the majority of that half. Where do you slot them now that you've seen them against elite-level competition compared to Prep and Central, who for the most part are everybody's 3 and 4?
Yeah, I think they're definitely right in there. And all three teams have some guys that maybe aren't as consistent, and they don't have the one dominant player like
go get a bucket guy.
Yeah, like so Bellevue West and Millard North, kind of the part of the reason they're as good as they are is because of that 1-2 tandem that you can count on every game with Chucky.
They have what I call a cut stopper, a guy that can stop the bleeding and get you by.
And then two of them, and then Hunter and Saint for Millard North. You don't quite have that level of guy on Central and Prep and Pius, but you've got a few different guys that can play that way in any given game. And we saw Sam Hostreiter kind of stepped up, had a really good game, efficient, 17 points, knocked down a couple of threes, finished inside the arc well.
You know who I really like? That I'm not sure how he's going to fit based on how they play, because they can play with pace. They shoot a ton of threes. I really like Dabercow. He's capable. He's crafty. He's got good depth around the 10. But it's almost like, okay, what are you giving up with him on the floor in terms of if you like to switch?
Well, and that was kind of the issue there is he was really effective and efficient, 4-4 from the field, 8 points, took advantage of the size mismatch because Bellevue West had to play small a lot when William Kyle was out of the lineup. And so on that end, he took advantage of his opportunities. But on the other end, when you're playing against a guy like Chucky Hepburn, he just hunted him relentlessly every single time.
They put him in those two-man games, and it was just like...
So
they made it tough. He's going to be interesting.
Not everybody's going to be able to do that against him. I think is kind of the point where Bellevue West is the only school that has Chucky Hepburn. There's nobody else like him. So there aren't a lot of teams that can identify and pick apart the weaknesses quite like they can. So
let me ask you this next question, and this is important because I think they're going to have to figure it out here in a hurry. If you're looking for a next potential cut stopper, let's start with Prep. Is it a Buckley? Is it a Jungers who may not be wired like that, but is capable, I think, at times, especially physically? Who's the guy that you think has to be able to quell a run or say, okay, hey, listen, we need a bucket, go get a bucket?
Yeah, it's probably Buckley. What we did see in that semifinal was it was Buckley and Justin City both in that backcourt. Kind of took
City's
over,
a good athlete.
Carried them in the second half, and they played really well. And every time they were the ones that had the answer. It's a little bit tougher. You can go through times, play through the post. It kind of depends on the defensive look you're getting. There against Westside, AJ Rollins dominated that game. He was that guy.
He took that game over.
But that hasn't been a consistent thing. So I think you're going to have to rely on those guys who I think can create the best advantage regardless of situation. But that's why Prep is so strong is they've got different ways they can beat you depending on who they're playing against.
Let's take Central. A lot of similar parts. Dawson probably shoots it the best. Does he have to shoot it the most? And if so, is he the guy that you look at as kind of the cut stopper, or is it the Denham Johnson? Maybe it's the underrated Fade Germany. Like, who's next up in that got to have a shot? Is it P.J. Davis? Who's the guy that can kind of quell the runs?
Yeah, I think you probably have to play through Denham, and then I think a guy like PJ is more of the kind of advantage scorer where somebody else makes a play and he's the one that finishes it. I think that's where you want versus him trying to be that guy that creates on his own. And Jay, I think, has a little bit more of that on-ball utility that can be that guy at times. But he's
probably
also
their best shooter as well.
But he's also best on the end of that catch and shoot. So I think it's a chance where you do play through Denham and Fay. You get guys that can get to the middle of the paint, and then they make the decision whether can we go up or am I kicking it out here to a Jay in the corner. And he didn't make those shots against Millard North, and that's why they weren't able to stay in that game as the game went on. They were really they did a great job of staying in that game for 3 quarters, but down the stretch they couldn't hit enough shots to keep up as Millard North kind of figured things out and finally started scoring a little bit more.
So kind of as you're looking at this, and you want to make a run, right? You got to win 4. If I'm doing the math right, once you get to wherever they play the state tournament, right? You got to win 4. Would you rather have all 7s and 8s, or would you like to be the team that has some 6s and 7s but has a couple of 10s that you can play in a tricky hand?
Yeah, I think in that situation, the kind of top end talent matters the most if the supporting cast fits and is solid and reliable enough to allow those guys to be as good as they are. If you're kind of a 1 or 2 man team where the other guys, you don't have to worry about them as much. You can send double teams and triple teams as those guys. It's tougher. But if you've got guys that can knock down shots, that can space the floor, then there's really no way that you can guard those kind of top tier guys one-on-one. So you're going to be at a disadvantage no matter what. So I think that's kind of what you're looking for. And that's what we see with Millard North and Bellevue West, why they're the clear top team is they've got those pure alphas, and then everybody around them plays their role really well.
Who, in your opinion, who's next closest to knocking on that talent door in terms of being able to come at you in different waves? Maybe not at an elite level like a Hepburn or a Salas or even a St. Thomas or a Frankie Fiddler for that matter. But who's got the next? Keep an eye on. Okay, they got a good collection of talent that could come at you in waves as well.
That's a good one, and it might be Westside.
They come to mind because of their youth.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Because next, Chucky and Hunter, those guys are moving on. Everybody at Westside's coming back.
Yeah.
And you've got the freshmen, your son and CJ Mitchell, that are kind of getting their feet wet this year. You expect those guys to make a big jump next year, knowing kind of, all right, this is what the deal is in varsity basketball. So you've got those, and then even the role players are all juniors. So that's, I think, the team that I expected a little bit more of them coming in here, and I think maybe I was just kind of jumping the gun a little bit because I saw all these guys that I thought are going to end up being really good players. Yeah. Maybe a couple of those guys aren't quite ready to play that role right away, losing the guys they did from last year's team.
Yeah, they lost their big shot takers.
Yeah. And so that puts guys in completely different roles, and they're still kind of learning that. But I think this experience here, that'll set them up really well for down the stretch this year and then heading into next year too.
Yeah, they showed me a little bit against Omaha South, and people may think, Omaha South, what's the big deal? Number one, South plays hard. South was coming off the win against Omaha North.
That was impressive.
It was an impressive win. I gave all the kudos in the world to Omaha North for the run that they were on and playing well, and South answered the dinner bell and matched their energy. But Westside played that game without Tate Oddbody. They had made a change in terms of juggling their lineup with Don Rezak, swapping out Caleb. I wondered how they were going to stay on the gas because they're playing much better as a team. That's why the game tomorrow night, for me, playing against an older, experienced, mature, grind you out kind of bunch like the Monarchs, should tell you a lot about where they are in terms of their evolution, because whether it's Kyle or Chase or Luke or Aidan or Joey Hylock, any of these guys, they guard, they touch you, they make life miserable on you, and they're a physical bunch. That game tomorrow is going to tell me a lot.
And that is, I guess, kind of the upside of these games getting pushed back is this becomes a really educational week because of all the different matches and all the games that we've already talked about where you've got teams in similar tiers that are trying to kind of fight for.
How about Central Millard North?
Yeah.
I mean, if Central wants to be the team that we think they're capable of being, where was the growth from the Metro Holiday tournaments to tomorrow, right? I mean, because, listen, Denham's a senior. Jaron Marshall. Faye Germany. PJ Davis, just a junior. Jay Dawson. They'll get some guys back, but that's an older bunch in some key spots. Like, now's the time for them.
Especially with two of those guys transferring in there to play their senior year on a winning team. So, this is kind of a big moment for them to show, all right, because you need, even if they don't beat them here, you need to kind of give yourself confidence heading, because good chance you see them in the postseason too.
Right.
So you can't come out here, play them for 3 quarters, then get kind of run away in the fourth quarter, come out here, and then you lose by 20. How are you guys feeling heading into round 3? You keep this close, you take it down the stretch. Even if you don't win, these guys are going to feel like, hey, we can get these guys. So it's a big game, not only for the seedings and the standings and everything, but just confidence-wise for a team like Central that we see as one of those teams that could potentially knock off one of these top teams.
Let me get to a couple of teams here. One in Gretna, kind of poking their head around the back end of this top 10, and Millard West, who for some is kind of, they're back in most people's top 10. Not real flashy. We've touched on them before, how they make you play basketball. We saw what they did to Grand Island in a game in which somehow Grand Island scored only 26 points.
Seems like Isaac Trout's been averaging almost that by himself all season.
You almost had to click refresh and take a double take, and I can't wait to watch how that actually came to fruition. But how about for that next group on that back end? How important for you are these next 3 or 4 games?
Yeah, and it's big. Like I said, there's so many teams that have those kind of similar, those hovering around 500, a couple games over, these teams that have played lighter schedules, that are maybe playing some tougher teams in the back half of the season. This is now where we start to see that separation of kind of that third tier, that fourth tier, who belongs in that chance where you're going to be a 1 or 2 seed in districts. You want to be one of kind of those top teams, give yourself a chance to do well heading into the postseason. So this is kind of where we start to see a little bit of that separation because like we talked about, once you get past 6, 7, 8, I mean, you could pick any of like 10 different teams that could potentially fill out that top 10. So this week, a team like Gretna you talked about, they're so young. And if they get a couple big wins under their belt, I think that'll do a lot for them. We talked about the confidence for Central going against Millard North. Confidence for these guys, especially because
it's 4 in a row, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Because they got Bell East, North Star.
7-4 now?
Yeah, they got Bell East, Lincoln East, North Star, and they just beat Southwest.
Yeah, and they almost they had Pius on the ropes.
Yeah.
Sam Hoiberg made a big shot down the stretch.
Yeah, that ended up being, that was a 4-point game.
Yeah.
That was a 40 to 36 point game, or a 40 to 36 score game, and you're thinking, they're so well coached.
36-35 going into there, and then that 3 to second chance 3. They missed a couple opportunities, got it back, and he hit the big shot, and then got a stop. But so that's it kind of shows you what they're capable of, especially in their home playing the way they do. So there are a few. Landon Pekorski. I only saw Gretna play once in person this season. I looked a little bit on streams at times, but Landon Pekorski is one of kind of 3 guys averaging double figures on kind of area teams, and he's a really impressive player. You can see he's got a feel for how to create shots for himself and for others. He can shoot the ball, kind of good athlete. Ricky Lofton for Omaha South is another one.
And you're talking now, you're into the freshman category now, right?
Yep.
Pekorski's one, Ricky Lofton another, who, and I told him this yesterday, his little brother, or on Sunday, his little brother plays for my youngest son's team, and I stopped him. He's sitting there kind of just minding his own business. I said, hey, there's 2 things that I love about your game. Number 1, he's limited his turnovers. He's taken better care of the basketball, and he's matured a little bit since his middle school days. Number 2, based on his body language, I never know what the score of the game is. He has come a long way in terms of head down, grinding. He impressed me. Wasn't afraid to take or make tough shots. He's come a long way in the growth of his game.
Yeah, I saw him play a little bit during the summer this past year. Kind of caught my eye there. That North game is the first time I saw him play in person at the high school level, and he was really impressive. Shot the ball really well.
Does not lack confidence.
No, he's shooting around.
Neither he nor Pekorski.
Yeah, exactly.
Both those guys will be fine. Pekorski's another guy. You start getting into these freshmen, they're in my wheelhouse because I've seen them play since, they've been 9, 10, 11 years old, right? We've been on the same grade.
Yeah, so Lofton, about 40% from 3, double-digit score. Marcus Glock at Wahoo on a quality program.
Another good player.
Playing right away as a freshman, averaging about 12 a game. Just smooth lefty, can shoot the ball, really finish at the line.
For you kids listening at home, the one thing that makes Marcus who he is, well, it's 2 things. Number 1, he's ultra-competitive. 2, he can use both hands. He can finish around the rim with both hands. You see a lot of the lefty smooth to his game, but we saw them in the summer for the last 3 years when he was playing with OSA, and I'm just thinking, you want to push him a certain direction, he'll go that way too. So Another guy, you look at his game and you think, not real flashy, but man, is he efficient. And he competes. You talk about coming from good stock. A lot of that is his mom and dad. Jason doesn't mess around. He's a competitive son of a gun.
Yep. And at Gretna, we talked about, Pekorski obviously is kind of the main guy, but they're playing so many freshmen. They got a lot of guys that are bouncing between JV and varsity. But Alex Wilcoxson is one of the best shooters. I think he's just over 50%
good shooter
from three this season. And
you better touch him and make him put it on the ground, put it on the floor. And
Will Cooper's another one at Millward South who does not lack for confidence. He'll let it go anywhere, and it's got a good chance of going in. Yeah. So
he will. You let him get comfy in that corner without having to put it on the deck, and he'll dead eye you. He will bury you.
Yep. So those are few of the kind of more productive freshmen in the area, and then you've got guys like your son Caleb, CJ Mitchell at Millward North or at Westside as well, Jaden Jackson.
Sweet stroke.
Yep, at Bellevue West coming off that bench, just hit 4 or 5 from 3, I think, in their last game. Daleron Thomas starting at North.
Really good player.
Guys like Neil Mosser and Eli Gaith at Millward North that are kind of a lot of these guys that are getting their feet wet at the varsity level this season that you're going to hear a lot from over the next 3 years. And it's good seeing so many of these guys get a chance to, even if they're not necessarily putting up 10, 15 points a game, they're getting a chance to play, and especially play for some good teams and learn how to play winning basketball.
Yeah, and all bias aside, I'll say the one thing I think that is different with Caleb is, with all the aforementioned, is what they ask him to do on the defensive end. Yeah. I'm the other way. He's got to become a two-way player offensively. Yeah. He's the defensive side of the ball in terms of taking good care of it and being a good rebounder. That part is kind of a proud papa.
Yeah, well,
he guards.
His offensive game is certainly strong on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, he did get at Dad. It was very well timed, and you know him, right? Oh, yeah. So like his personality, that's that dry, wry.
Not going to talk a lot, but
he doesn't say a ton, but
he'll drop these barbs here and there whenever the opportunity presents itself.
I had to stand up and give him a slow clap. If you missed that, we welcome you to Twitter. He's in response to me. I'm at Damon Benning. I can't even remember. I don't even know who he is. I think he's at Caleb Benning 1 or something like that. But you're right. The freshman group, really, really good days ahead. And the cool thing is you're talking to two guys that have seen these guys play forever. Yeah. Right? If you're in a gym, I'm probably not too far behind, and if you're in a gym, you're in a gym. Yeah. Right? That is what Jacob does. He's one of the best in the business. That's why we love talking to him, because we can get all sorts of I's dotted and T's crossed when it comes to the full repertoire. We'll get to Class B next week. There'll be some good ones in A this week. That's Nebraska Preps Postgame. That's Jacob Padilla. I'm Damon Benning. Make sure you listen to the pod. Catch us any way you can. We'll be back next week. It's Nebraska Preps Postgame.
A Hurrdat Media Production.